At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. After all, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Larissa. Let's begin. Zafina Thislin, a junior ethnographer for the Farang Concordance, stood at the heart of what her preliminary research aptly termed a sustained sensory assault node. The natives called it Times Square. She compressed her voice, typically a layered instrument of Farang communication, into a flat melodic monotone for her recording device. Internally, a dissonant chord of sensory overload threatened to shatter her composure. On her home world, Fos, communication was a gentle symphony of tonal language, the air carrying only the refined, curated pheromones of civic harmony. Here, the air was a dense, greasy medium for countless competing signals. Aggression from vehicular horns, desperation from food cart vendors, territorial musk from performers in stained cartoon character costumes, and a pervasive low-level thrum of existential panic from the scurrying masses. To her refined foreign senses, the experience was an olfactory supernova. Cam-E, she murmured, her voice a low monotone that the din almost swallowed. Are you recording this auditory chaos? A sleek biconvex disc of polished, darkened alloy hovered at her shoulder. A soft chime, a single resonant note sounded from its chassis. Affirmative, ethnographer, Thislin, replied the AI, his voice a synthesized baritone. Currently logging ambient sound at 100 decibels, a level associated with Concordance archives with the tectonic fracturing of small moons. I am also identifying over 6,000 distinct pheromonal signatures within a 10-meter radius, the majority of which correlate with elevated cortisol and unregulated glucose consumption. Zafina adjusted the microscopic filter in her respiratory vents. My initial voiceover for the documentary's introduction is proving difficult to record. She cleared her throat, attempting to project the serene academic tone required for a Concordance ethnographic profile. C8193, colloquially known as Earth, a world of vibrant contradictions where the dominant species, humans, have built a civilization that is both a marvel of emergent complexity and a testament to their own chaotic nature. They communicate primarily through... A man screaming into a small rectangular device cut through her narration. No, I told you, Brenda, I told you! The gluten-free lasagna is for the client meeting, not for your dance troupe. He stomped past, radiating a pheromonal cloud of fury and, confusingly, yeast. Through competitive yelling. Zafina finished, a low frequency of resignation resonating in her voice, a frequency of intellectual surrender. A statistically accurate observation, Cam-E noted. My analysis of the local broadcast indicates the participant who produces the highest volume of sustained vocalization determines the outcome of most human televised competitions, including political debates, culinary challenges, and spousal selection rituals. A massive digital screen above them flickered to life, displaying a 30-foot-tall human female spraying a fine mist of liquid onto her armpits. She then smiled with a startling number of teeth, a gesture Zafina's research indicated was a sign of satisfaction, though it looked more like a prelude to a predatory act. The planet's 1.0 G gravity weighed on Zafina's slender Farang frame, built for a lighter world. Perhaps a change of venue is in order. Objective analysis in this node is improbable. I have already cross-referenced our mission parameters with local environmental data, Cam-E said. To find a location on this landmass with zero human-generated sensory output, we would need to travel 200 kilometers north and bury ourselves 3 meters underground. Zafina considered it for a moment. The thought was peaceful. Instead, she sighed, a soft exhalation of filtered air. Back to the designated habitat, then. I need to recenter my perceptions. The chaos of Times Square swirled around her, a bewildering, vibrant, and utterly exhausting testament to a species she had to understand in 30 days. A low, pulsing thrum emanated from her, a specific Farang frequency for a migraine. The motel room was a study in beige. The walls, the carpet, the bedspread all shared a profound neutrality, a sensory deprivation chamber that Zafina found blissful after the city's intensity. She dimmed the lights, the dissonant frequencies in her mind settling into a calm, steady hum. In the midst of cataloging a sample of local flora, a wilting carnation she'd found abandoned on the sidewalk. The air in the room's center shimmered. The shimmer coalesced into the holographic form of Prelate Vanox. He was a senior Faran, his voice a chord of absolute authority, each tone resonating with the weight of high office. He began directly. "Ethnographer Thislin, your initial data stream has arrived. It is noisy." Vanix's vocal tones were tight and controlled, the auditory equivalent of a formal posture. "Prelate," Zafina acknowledged, her own voice shifting to a submissive tonal chord. "The environment is more sensorially dense than anticipated. I am still establishing a baseline for objective observation." "We must forego objectivity," Vanix stated. A projection of tactical data materialized beside him, a red line representing Earth's atmospheric carbon levels climbing at a near vertical angle. Another chart showed the planet's extinction rate, a jagged spike that dwarfed all previous geological epochs. A third, more complex schematic detailed the probability of global thermonuclear conflict, with a dozen smaller nodes pulsing with alarm. "This is the data from the Long-Range Orbital Survey," Vanix explained, his voice flat. "C-819-3 is beyond chaotic, Safina. It is terminally unstable. The High Directorate is moving to classify it as a Class 9 hazard world, a full planetary quarantine." A sharp overtone of alarm sounded in Safina's voice, a frequency she suppressed. "A Class 9? That classification is a first for a sapient inhabited world. That would seal them off from the galaxy permanently." "The danger they pose is likewise unprecedented. Their volatility is a potential contagion. Their radio broadcasts have already destabilized the political climate of two systems in the Perseus arm. Their philosophies are infectious." Vanix gestured to the grim charts. "The numbers are absolute. This species is on a trajectory towards self-annihilation, and our primary directive is to ensure their self-annihilation remains contained." "But our mission," Zafina protested. "The purpose of this ethnographic survey was to find context, to understand the species before the Directorate rendered judgment." "The mission is now a formality," Vanix said, his tones hardening to a resolute, piercing chord. "A final box to check before mobilizing the quarantine fleet. However, I have convinced the Directorate to grant a small window. You have 1 Terran month, 30 of their days. Find me something, Safina. Find me one piece of quantifiable, statistically significant evidence that this species possesses what the Concordance defines as redeeming galactic value. Show me something beyond these charts. Anything less, and I will personally sign the quarantine order." The Prelate's gaze was steady. "I understand, Prelate," Zafina said, her voice a quiet monotone, but her internal frequencies were a turmoil of conflicted frequencies. The hologram of Vanix and his grim charts dissolved, leaving Zafina alone in the room's beige silence. "Cam E," she said, her voice a soft whisper. "Define redeeming galactic value." "My primary lexicon lacks that term," the AI responded after a moment. "However, cross-referencing legal precedent from the High Directorate suggests it is a deliberately ambiguous classification, most often used to justify politically convenient decisions. In layman's terms, it means a compelling reason to preserve the planet." Zafina looked at the wilting carnation in her hand. This illogical, impractical, beautiful thing was a terrible place to start. If we are to find value, we must first identify the core principles of their society, Zafina declared, pacing the motel room's length. Vanix's data focuses on destruction at a macro level. It is a top-down analysis. Our approach will be bottom-up. We will locate the foundational engine of their civilization. "A logical course of action," Cam E agreed, hovering near the ceiling. "I have been analyzing their global information network. The primary driver of their societal structure appears to be the acquisition and exchange of symbolic tokens known as currency." "A system of ritualized barter," Zafina mused. "This exchange most clearly expresses their values. We will go to the heart of it. Where is the nexus of this activity? The central temple of their economic faith?
My analysis indicates multiple high-volume transaction nodes, Cam E said. However, to observe the species in its most concentrated state of economic fervor, one location stands out, a place of extreme transactional density and high-frequency symbolic communication.
Excellent. Where?
They designate it the New York Stock Exchange. Cam E stated, I would advise calibrating your optical sensors to their highest filtration setting. Reports describe the visual data as frantic. To expedite her research and move past the surface-level chaos, Safina had formulated a new directive.
Cam E, initiate a new analytical protocol. Maximum human social entropy. Triangulate locations where the greatest number of humans are interacting with the highest degree of unpredictable energy. It is in these moments of greatest volatility that their true nature must surely reveal itself.
An interesting hypothesis. Ethnographer, if hazardous. Contemplative chimes issued from Cam E. Protocol initiated. The New York Stock Exchange aligns with the parameters of maximum social entropy. My projections indicate a high probability of observing behavior that FOSS would classify as symptomatic of acute neurological distress.
Perfect,
Zafina said with an academic's enthusiasm.
There, we will find the truth.
A screaming man in a brightly colored jacket threw pieces of paper on the floor. Hundreds of other people surrounded him, all screaming, all waving their hands in the air, all staring intently at glowing numbers that poured down the walls in a torrent of panic. Discarded paper littered the floor, each slip a forgotten transaction. Safina stood on the observation balcony, her posture rigid with focus. Cam E hovered beside her, his recording lens panning across the scene.
It is a ritual of shared distress,
she dictated in a low whisper. Cam E's internal systems transcribed her notes. Observe their strained devotional gestures, the hands clasped to their heads, the outstretched arms, pleading for intervention from an unseen force. Below, a trader clutched his head and yelled, Sell! For the love of God, sell it all!
He is leading the catechism,
Zafina noted.
The others respond in a chorus of communal grief. They are beseeching an invisible deity of fortune, a cruel and fickle god who communicates its displeasure through the sacred glowing runes on the wall.
My audio analysis confirms a synchronized spike in vocalizations corresponding with a negative integer change in the rune designated DJIA. Cam E offered. The participants' heart rates have collectively elevated by 35%. This is psychology consistent with a predator-prey response.
Exactly,
Zafina said, leaning forward, captivated.
They are enacting a primal hunt. The judgment of their god symbolically slays them, falling into despair, only to be reborn when the runes turn a favorable color. Notice the man in the blue jacket. He now weeps with joy.
A trader was indeed weeping, hugging a colleague after a sudden market upswing. We're saved! The leveraged buyout went through. My kids can go to college.
A moment of spiritual release,
Zafina interpreted.
He has received a sign of favor. This entire spectacle is a deeply ingrained religious ceremony, a performance of communal suffering and redemption on a massive scale. It is illogical and utterly mesmerizing. This is the engine of their world, a constant cycle of self-inflicted panic and desperate hope.
An astute, if anthropologically unorthodox conclusion, Cam E stated. My programming classifies this behavior as detrimental to their species' survival. This is an extortionately complex method for inducing stress. Safina, engrossed, remained silent. After the first week, her data drive contained only records of chaos, lacking any hint of redeeming value. While monitoring local law enforcement frequencies, part of the maximum entropy protocol designed to locate sudden spikes in societal disorder, Cam E detected an anomaly. Ethnographer, I am intercepting a coded transmission, he announced as they walked down a grimy street several blocks from the financial district. The communication references a covert chemical exchange scheduled to occur in a subardial transit corridor nearby. Safina's antennae, two delicate tendrils atop her head, twitched with interest.
A chemical exchange? Is it part of their industrial process?
Unlikely given the communication's covert nature, Cam E replied. The transmission uses terminology associated with high-risk, unsanctioned material transfers, designating the participants as unfriendlies. This could be an opportunity to observe human tribal dynamics in a high-stakes negotiation.
An excellent suggestion, Cam E. Lead the way.
The algorithm guided them into a narrow alleyway wedged between a brick tenement and a laundromat. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete, overflowing dumpsters, and something vaguely like burnt sugar. At the alley's far end, two groups of men faced each other. They wore dark, bulky clothing, and their postures were rigid with tension. One man held a heavy briefcase. Another, from the opposing group, nervously clutched a gym bag. This ritual possessed a quiet, coiled danger, unlike the trading floor's fervor. From the rooftops above and at the alley's mouth, Detective O'Malley and his undercover team held their positions. This was the culmination of a 6-month investigation. The target was a mid-level distributor of narcotics named Rico, and he was jumpy. Any surprise could make him bolt. O'Malley whispered into his wristcom.
All teams hold. Wait for the handoff. On my signal.
Just as O'Malley gave the signal to hold, Safina Thistlein, her tall, slender frame a stark silhouette in the grimy darkness, walked into the alley's middle. Cam E floated behind her. The effect was instantaneous. Everyone froze. The drug dealers stared, their mouths agape. Rico, who inched a hand toward a pistol tucked in his waistband, froze. They had seen a lot of strange things in their line of work, but a tall, slender, utterly alien being was new to them. On the rooftop, O'Malley lowered his binoculars in disbelief, then raised them again.
What the hell is that thing?
He whispered.
Is that informant from the 7th Precinct? The one they call Stilts?
That's a negative, Detective.
A voice crackled in his ear.
Our informant is a 60-year-old woman who runs a hot dog stand. That's someone else.
Safina focused on her study, approached the man with the gym bag. She tilted her head, a gesture of polite inquiry on Foz.
Greetings,
she said, her monotone voice cutting through the charged silence.
I am conducting an ethnographic study of this planet's customs. I believe a chemical exchange is to take place.
She gestured with a long, elegant finger toward the bag.
Is the purpose of this powdered compound to achieve an altered state of existential perception?
The dealer, a man whose entire life had prepared him for violence, betrayal, and prison, found that his experience provided no framework for this question. He stared at Safina, then at his partner, then back at the serene alien who was asking him about the existential properties of his product. O'Malley, on the rooftop, had a similar moment of cognitive dissonance. He had two theories, both insane. One, a performance artist had taken a catastrophically wrong turn. Two, a rival cartel had sent a new enforcer and their recruitment standards had gotten bizarre. He leaned into the second theory. If she was with the opposition, she was creating a distraction. If she was a civilian, he had to prevent her from taking a bullet. Either way, he had to move.
Go, go, go!
He yelled into his comm. Confusion still paralyzed the dealers when O'Malley's team swarmed the alley. Rico, thinking Safina was some kind of bizarre, divisionary tactic by a competitor, made a critical error. He yelled instead of drawing his weapon.
Who the hell are you with?
Safina considered the question.
I am a Foran Concordance affiliate, conducting research under the High Directorate's Directive for Xenological Studies.
This answer was the last thing Rico heard before two undercover officers tackled him. The other dealers, seeing their leader taken down and an impassive alien discussing xenology, surrendered. They dropped their bags and put their hands in the air. The entire bust concluded in 30 seconds of baffled confusion. O'Malley cuffed Rico himself, his face a mask of weary disbelief. He glanced over at Connolly, his youngest undercover officer, who looked pale. The kid was closest to Rico's number 2, the one with the twitchy trigger finger. O'Malley knew, with certainty, the serene alien's presence had prevented a firefight. She had probably saved Connolly's life. He looked over at Zafina, who now patiently waited for an answer to her question about the powdered compound.
You,
O'Malley grunted, nodding at her.
Stay right there. I need to ask you about your existential perceptions.
The confusion Zafina had sown extended beyond the criminals, enabling O'Malley's team to make the arrest, a fact O'Malley would studiously omit from the official report. In the bust's aftermath, uniformed officers flashing lights and the crackle of multiple radios flooded the alley. The NYPD, in accordance with protocol for major operations, had deployed portable signal jammers to prevent any remote detonations or coordinated escapes. For Zafina, the effect was devastating. The city's dense pheromonal soup was already a disorienting assault she navigated with Cammie's guidance. The signal jammers blocked more than radio waves. Their electromagnetic field violently disrupted Cammie's delicate navigation and positioning systems. Ethnographer. Cam-E's voice crackled with static, his resonant chimes stuttering erratically.
Something has compromised my navigational grid. I am experiencing significant spatial disorientation. Location data is corrupted.
The miasma of human adrenaline and fear overwhelmed Zafina's own internal sense of direction, which relied on subtle pheromonal traces. The city became a swirl of noise and smell without pattern or direction.
Directive,
she commanded, her voice tight with controlled panic.
Find the nearest vector to a zone of minimal sensory input. Now.
Executing. Cam-E sputtered. Logic core. Functional. Identifying public transport route. Q9. Terminating in low-density residential sector. Nearest access point. 3 blocks east. Detective O'Malley was trying to get a statement from her, but a senior officer called him over to inspect the confiscated evidence. In that brief moment of distraction, Zafina, acting on Cammie's garbled directions and an instinct to escape the overwhelming sensory input, slipped from the alley's mouth. She followed the flickering arrow on Cammie's chassis, stumbling through the crowds until she found a bus stop. She boarded the first vehicle that arrived, a long machine, blue and white, that hissed as it lowered itself for her. The bus carried her from the tall corridors of brick and glass across a massive bridge and deep into a world of 2-story houses with small patches of green. On a quiet street corner, under the soft glow of a new lamp, she stood lost, the path back to her habitat gone. Martha Stockworth was watering her hydrangeas. This was her evening ritual, a quiet moment with the blossoms of vibrant blue and pink that fought a yearly battle against the city's grime. She believed that showing a living thing consistent kindness would repay her with beauty, a philosophy she applied to flowers, stray cats, and people with equal conviction. As she misted a particularly stubborn cluster of blooms, the figure stood on the corner. The tall and slender being wore a simple, seamless gray tunic. It stood motionless, but Martha, who had raised 3 children and seen 4 grandchildren through their teenage years, was fluent in the universal body language of distress. She recognized the rigid posture, the slight tremor in the hands, the unfocused gaze of someone utterly lost. The figure looked like they were a long way from home and had missed their last bus. Her husband of 60 years had often told her that her instinct to invite strays into their home would one day get her into trouble. So far, that instinct had only brought her interesting company. Martha put down her watering can. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at the strange, tall figure. Her smile warmed her eyes. Thistle, with a simple gesture, she pointed to herself, then to her front door, and made a motion with her hand as if lifting a bowl to her mouth. I am going inside for food. You should come too. Zafina watched the small human. The being's pheromonal signature was unlike anything she had yet encountered in this city. Calm, warm, and smelling faintly of soil, yeast, and something else. Something her translators struggled with, settling on the term profound welcome. Zafina's academic protocols warned her against engagement, against contaminating the study. But her fear, her exhaustion, and her profound loneliness whispered a different argument. The human female smiled again, the skin crinkling around her eyes in an absolute invitation.
With a moment's hesitation, Zafina stepped forward, then another. She crossed the street and walked up the small path to the front door that the human was now holding open for her. The smell of ginger, garlic, and roasting meat flowed out, a warm tide against the city's cold chaos. The Stockworth family's home was the opposite of Zafina's beige motel room, a riot of life. Framed photographs of smiling people at various ages covered the walls. A television in the corner played a brightly colored cartoon loudly. Two children argued in a language Cam-E identified as Mandarin over a video game controller. Their pheromones a chaotic mix of sibling rivalry and genuine affection. A man who looked like an older version of the people in the photos stood at the stove, stirring a massive wok that sizzled and steamed. This was Martha's son, David. He looked up as his mother entered with her tall, silent guest, gave a questioning look, but then smiled and gestured with his spatula to a seat at the large, cluttered dining table.
Ma, you were supposed to be watering the flowers, not adopting stray tourists.
Welcome, he said, nodding to Zafina.
Hope you're hungry.
Zafina sat, her body rigid. The volume of overlapping sounds, smells, and emotional signals was dense enough to be overwhelming. But here, the feeling was different. The entropy in this room was coherent, a contrast to the aggressive energy of Times Square, a chaos bound by a complex weave of shared history and affection. Martha placed a small bowl of rice and a pair of wooden sticks in front of Zafina. Then she piled food onto her plate, glistening pieces of chicken, crisp green vegetables, and a small, perfectly pleated dumpling.
Eat,
she said, her voice gentle but firm. Her tone was less a suggestion and more a diagnosis and prescription. The children, having resolved their dispute via a brief wrestling match, now turned to Zafina. The younger one, a girl named Lizzie, pointed at her.
"You're shiny,"
she declared. Zafina tilted her head.
"It is a function of my integumentary system,"
she explained in her flat monotone. Lizzie's brother Liam scoffed.
"She talks like a robot."
Leon, be nice,
David chided, placing the steaming wok on the table. He sat down and served himself.
Sorry about them. They think anyone who doesn't shout is weird.
The family ate. They talked over each other, laughed at jokes beyond Zafina's understanding, and passed plates back and forth. They accepted her presence with a simple, profound openness. Martha pointed to the dumpling on Zafina's plate. She demonstrated how to use the wooden sticks, a feat of dexterity that baffled Zafina, and then gestured for her to try it. Hesitantly, Zafina managed to grasp the dumpling. She brought it to her mouth. The sensation was extraordinary. A burst of savory meat, warm ginger, and rich, salty sauce filled her senses. Complex, illogical, and deeply comforting. For a moment, all analysis ceased. She was a person, a long way from home, sharing a meal. Later, after they cleared the dishes and wrangled the children into bed, David found Zafina sitting on the front porch swing. The evening air was cool and the city's sounds were a distant hum. Cam-E hovered discreetly near the porch light, his own systems having recalibrated in the stable environment. David sat in a wicker chair beside her, holding a mug of tea. For a while, they sat in silence.
You looked pretty lost out there,
he said.
"My navigation was compromised,"
Zafina replied.
"This city generates a great deal of conflicting data."
David chuckled.
That's one way to put it. I'm a structural engineer. I build bridges. I spend my days trying to make sense of things. Take all that chaos, traffic, wind, weight, time, and channel it into something strong and stable, something that connects people.
He used his hands as he spoke, shaping the air.
It's all about tension and compression. Pulling on something creates tension. Pushing on it creates compression. A good bridge, a good building, even a good family, I guess. It is about balancing them. You use the tension in one place to handle the compression in another. You turn all that stress into strength.
Zafina watched his hands, her mind racing. Tension, compression, chaos channeled into strength. She had observed humanity as a collection of chaotic particles screaming into emptiness, missing the opposite force, the instinct to build, to connect, to create stability in the midst of chaos. David took a sip of his tea. Work had me out in the Hudson Highlands last month, surveying an old NASA site for historical preservation. A decommissioned deep space comms faculty. Incredible piece of engineering, mostly analog. Giant steel dish, massive motors, all built with manual overrides. They built it assuming everything else would fail. It's archaic, but it's robust. It's a machine designed purely for one thing: to send a voice out into the great big empty, hoping someone else is listening.
An epiphany bloomed in Zafina's mind, a sudden, clear chord of understanding. She followed the algorithm of chaos, searching for humanity's soul in its moments of greatest entropy. But that was only half the equation. A constructive impulse balanced the destructive one. The quiet invitation to dinner countered the yelling. The trading floor's panic found its counterpoint in the patient strength of a bridge. She was looking at the problem upside down. The beige motel room felt different when she returned. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a sterile prison. Its clinical emptiness seemed wrong after the Stockworth home's vibrant warmth. Zafina stood in the room's center, her posture straighter, her purpose clear.
Chem E.
She said, her voice firm. Ethnographer.
Access the primary mission directive, the maximum human social entropies protocol.
Accessed. Cam E confirmed. The protocol's logic tree appeared on the wall, a complex web of algorithms designed to seek out conflict, panic, and disorder.
Delete it,
Zafina commanded. Cam E was silent for a full 3 seconds. Clarification requested. Deleting the primary analytical protocol will render all data collected thus far directionless. That would be an act of significant scientific deviation.
The protocol is flawed,
Zafina stated. Her voice resonated with a new, resolute tone.
It rests on a false premise. We measured the storm while ignoring the structures built to withstand it. We analyzed the sickness while ignoring the human response. Our new directive is to document acts of constructive empathy and communal engineering.
Another pause followed. Then the logic tree on the wall dissolved into pixels and vanished. Protocol deviation confirmed and executed. Cam E said. His voice was perfectly neutral, but she detected a novel subroutine resembling approval. Compiling a new list of potential subjects based on revised parameters. Initial targets include volunteer food distribution centers, public libraries, pediatric medical facilities, and kindergarten teachers.
An excellent start,
Zafina said. A new energy coursed through her. She transformed from a dispassionate cataloger of a doomed species into a scientist who had discovered a flaw in her hypothesis, and she had a month to prove her new theory right. With less than 3 weeks remaining on her deadline, the following days became a blur of activity. Zafina's documentary took a new shape, a portrait of a species at war with its own worst instincts. She and Cami visited a kindergarten in the Bronx. Zafina, a towering silent presence in the classroom's corner, filmed as a teacher named Miss Flores knelt to help a crying child tie his shoe. She turned the frustrating task into a game, her voice a low, soothing counter-melody to the classroom's joyful chaos. They documented a group of volunteers tending a community garden tucked between 2 crumbling apartment buildings. People, young and old, from every background worked side by side, their hands in the dirt, coaxing life from a patch of forgotten urban land. They laughed and shared water bottles, their shared purpose a visible bond. Zafina recorded an elderly man explaining to a teenager how to tell when a tomato was perfectly ripe. She followed David Stockworth to the bridge he was helping to maintain. Standing on the massive structure as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the water, Zafina filmed him as he pointed out the colossal steel cables and the deep concrete pylons. He spoke of load capacities and stress tolerances. He was upholding a promise, keeping a vital connection open for millions of people he would never meet. Driven by a new curiosity, Zafina sought out Detective O'Malley. She found him at his precinct, slumped over a desk cluttered with cold coffee cups and paperwork. He looked even more tired under the flat fluorescent lights than he had in the alley.
The alien informant?
He grunted, his gaze fixed on his desk.
Come to confess you're part of a Martian sleeper cell? It would make my paperwork easier.
I came to understand your function,
Zafina said, activating Cam E's recording lens. O'Malley looked up, his eyes wary. He opened his mouth to make another sarcastic comment, but his posture deflated instead. He picked up a framed photograph from his desk, a picture of a smiling young girl with pigtails missing her 2 front teeth.
This is my daughter, Casey, he said. She thinks I fight monsters for a living, and she's right, I guess. It's just, monsters usually look like regular people. Scared people, stupid people. People who made a bad choice 10 years ago and are still paying for it.
He stared at the photo.
They do this job because this city, it's a mess. It's loud and it's dirty and it's unfair. But it's also full of people trying to get by. People like my Casey. And my job, the way I see it, is to just stand on the wall. To keep the chaos from spilling over and washing away the good parts. The kindergartens, the little league games, the quiet streets where a kid can ride her bike. Glory is rare. Good days are scarce. But the work is necessary.
Zafina remained silent. She let the camera roll, capturing the deep lines on his face, the worn grip of his service weapon, and the fierce, protective affection with which he regarded the small, smiling face in the frame. Here was another builder. Aboard the Ferran command vessel in high orbit on the 28th day of Zafina's allotted 30, Prelate Vanox reviewed the final data packet. The new footage played before him, his vocal tones a cool, analytical chord. The images held a warmth, an unquantifiable variable that lay outside his chart's predictions. He paused the playback on a close-up shot Zafina had taken at the Stockworth family's home. The clip showed Martha Stockworth, her face crinkled in a smile, offering Zafina a dumpling, a simple act, an offering of sustenance, an invitation. Vanek stared at it for a long time, a flicker of an uncertain tone in his voice before the chord tightened back to cold analysis.
Statistically insignificant sentiment,
he murmured to himself, the words a familiar shield against data that resisted his parsing.
Anomalous behavior from a single isolated unit.
He scanned through the remaining footage. The content was all the same, small, quiet moments of connection. These moments seemed insufficient against the planet's overwhelming trajectory towards self-destruction. He concluded Zafina had become compromised, her academic objectivity eroded by emotional contamination. With a weary sigh, he made his decision. He was a physician whose patient failed to respond to treatment. The time had come to begin the quarantine.
Commander,
he said, turning to an aide.
Initiate a preliminary communications blackout on the ethnographer's channel. Sever her high-bandwidth link to the Concordance. And signal the fleet. Tell them to move to staging positions. The quarantine begins in 12 hours.
Back in the beige motel, a crimson alert icon pulsed on Zafina's main monitor, overriding the image of David's bridge. Warning. Preliminary quarantine fleet approaching. Official Concordance channel terminated. Terminal lockout in 11:59:51. A frantic, dissonant chord of panic seized Zafina. Time had run out. Panic was an unproductive emotion. Zafina forced it down, converting the adrenaline into focused energy. The Concordance channel had vanished, but her local comm still worked. Her first thought was of the Stockworths. She sent a desperate, encrypted message to the personal device David had given her. 10 minutes later, she was standing on their porch again, the vibrant energy of their home visible through the living room window. She explained the situation as best she could, her monotone delivery struggling to convey the threat's galactic scale. She spoke of a high directorate, a quarantine fleet, and a communications blackout. The Stockworth family listened, their expressions a mixture of confusion and concern. Martha, sensing Zafina's distress, put a comforting hand on her arm. David paced the living room.
So, let me get this straight, he said. Your boss, this Vanix guy, he's seen all the bad stuff. The pollution, the wars, the stock market. And he's, posing a giant do-not-enter sign on the whole solar system?
Inaccurate if colloquial summary,
Zafina confirmed.
He believes your people are a contagion and that I am infected. He cut me off before I can transmit my final report. My evidence of
She struggled for the right word.
balance.
David stopped pacing. He looked from Zafina's panicked expression to his mother's calm face, to the photos on the wall of his children, his family, his life. He understood injustice, even with the strange context of aliens and their fleets. He understood someone making a judgment from incomplete information. And then a memory sparked.
The NASA facility.
He said, his voice quickening with an idea.
The old deep space comm station in the Highlands. It's decommissioned, but the hardware is mostly intact. The transmitter dish is massive. Designers built it to broadcast on frequencies that could pierce solar flares. It operates on a closed system, disconnected from any modern network. If we can get it working, it might be powerful enough to bypass their local blackout and transmit directly to your high directorate.
A new hopeful tone appeared in Zafina's voice.
A direct broadcast? Is it possible?
I don't know,
David admitted.
It's a long shot. The place has been unused for decades, but it's the only shot we've got.
A surge of energy filled the room. David grabbed the NASA facility's blueprints he'd downloaded for his survey, spreading them across the dining table. Martha, declaring that a desperate plan requires snacks, packed a cooler with sandwiches, thermoses of tea, and a container of dumplings.
For energy,
she stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Zafina, her mind racing with the technical possibility, knew they needed more help. They needed to get past the security of a state-protected historic site, and they needed someone effective in a crisis. One person came to mind. Detective O'Malley answered his phone on the first ring.
This better not be about existentialism,
he grumbled.
I'm off duty.
Zafina, with David's help, explained the situation. She omitted the details about aliens and quarantine fleets, framing it instead as a need to access an old transmitter to send an urgent message to her superiors to prevent a terrible misunderstanding. O'Malley was silent for a long moment. Every cynical cop instinct screamed that this was insane. But he also remembered the bust and the look on young Connolly's face. He owed her more than an explanation for a weird question. He owed her a life.
A manhunt,
O'Malley said.
I'll call in a favor with the state park rangers. Tell him we're tracking a fugitive in the Highlands. And we have a tip he's holed up in the old NASA station. It'll get us through the gate, but if they catch us, we're all going to jail for a long time.
He paused.
I'll meet you at the turn-off in an hour. And if you're lying to me, and this is about a Martian invasion, I'm shooting you first.
He ended the call. The Stockworth family, plus one alien ethnographer and her AI companion, mobilized. They piled into David's minivan, blueprints, cooler, Zafina, and a hovering Cam-E, and headed north, a desperate, cobbled-together team on a mission to save the world. The state park ranger at the security gate looked skeptical, but O'Malley's badge and his grim, convincing story about a dangerous fugitive got them through. They drove a winding, overgrown access road, the minivan's headlights piercing the darkness. The NASA comms station sat on a cleared hilltop, a hulking concrete building beside a colossal satellite dish, aimed at a silent sky like a great sleeping ear. A lock secured the main building, a heavy rusted bolt securing its steel door. O'Malley was about to suggest using the minivan as a battering ram when David held up a hand.
Wait, let me look.
He ran his fingers over the door's massive hinges, his engineer's eyes scanning for weaknesses. He pointed to a spot where the rust was thickest, where years of winter freezes had warped the metal.
There,
he said to O'Malley.
Rust had compromised the tensile strength. Your tire iron. I need leverage at that exact fulcrum point. Too hard and you'll just bend the iron. A series of short, sharp impacts. Think of it like a conversation, not an argument.
O'Malley gave him a baffled look, but wedged the tire iron into the spot David indicated. He grunted and heaved. The door groaned. Metal screeched against rusted metal. With a final shuddering crack, the bolt gave way. The door swung inward, opening into a dark, cavernous space that smelled of dust and dormant machinery. They were in. The control room's interior was a relic of another era. Massive consoles with chunky physical switches lined the walls. Cables as thick as a human arm snaked across the floor. David shone a flashlight around.
Okay, power first.
He followed a thick conduit to a backup generator in an adjacent room. After a tense 10 minutes of checking fuel lines and wrestling with a stubborn starter cord, the generator roared to life. Lights flickered on in the control room, casting long shadows. A hum rose as the old consoles warmed up. David rushed into the main transmitter panel. A few status lights blinked green, but most were dead.
Okay, we have power to the transmitter,
he said. Sweat slicked his brow.
But the master positioning controls are fried. The dish is locked in place.
A low thrum of distress sounded from Zafina, but David was already moving, his mind working faster than the flickering lights. He spotted a smaller console in the corner, covered in a thick layer of dust, a local maintenance terminal.
There!
He exclaimed.
If the direct control board is shot, maybe I can bypass it. Hotwire the local terminal to talk directly to the positioning motors.
He pried open a panel, revealing a dense web of wires. To Zafina, the panel looked like chaos.
Camille, can you interpret this?
Zafina asked. Affirmative. The AI replied, cross-referencing archaic NASA schematics, projecting a bypass schematic now. A simple color-coded diagram overlaid the wires.
I can read that,
David said, a new confidence in his voice. He pulled wires, stripping ends with his teeth and twisted them together, following the AI's guidance in an act of desperate improvisation. After several tense minutes, a dusty monitor on the maintenance terminal flicked to life, displaying a stream of green text, a raw command line interface. David let out a whoop of triumph.
We're in! We have the dish motors control.
The quarantine fleet moves into final position in 14 minutes. Cam E announced, his voice a calm counterpoint to the rising tension. I can project the required targeting coordinates to establish a direct link with the High Directorate's private frequency. However, they are dynamic. The concordance vessel is in a low cloaked orbit using erratic micro-adjustments to avoid local detection. You will need to align the dish and compensate for its rapid movement and atmospheric distortion in real time. Cam E projected a stream of complex numbers and shifting vectors onto the dusty monitor.
I can't do this alone,
David said, his eyes wide as he looked at the flood of data.
I need to input the commands, but someone has to read me the telemetry, and fast.
I will provide the telemetry,
Zafina said, her voice steady.
And somebody needs to watch the load,
David added, pointing to a large analog gauge on the wall. Its needle rested on 0.
These motors haven't moved in 30 years. If we push them too hard, they'll seize or strip the gears. Someone needs to call out a warning if that needle gets into the red.
O'Malley stepped forward. Telemetry and command lines were foreign to him, but he understood a needle moving toward a red line.
I've got the gauge,
he said, his eyes fixed on the dial.
Begin,
Zafina commanded. The work began.
Azimuth 214.88.
Zafina called out, reading from Cammie's projection. David keyed in arcane commands.
Executing. Now!
The whole building groaned as outside the massive dish moved for the first time in decades.
Load at 60%!
O'Malley yelled, his gaze fixed on the needle.
Elevation 9.13. Correction 14.
Zafina's voice was sharp.
Compensating.
David grunted, sweat stinging his eyes.
Load at 80, it's climbing fast. Easy.
David muttered to the machine, easing back on the motor speed. The groan of stress metal lessened slightly. The needle dipped back to 75%. For 6 tense minutes, they worked in a frantic rhythm. Zafina called the numbers, David translated them into commands, and O'Malley served as the machine's conscience, keeping them from tearing it apart.
95% load,
O'Malley shouted.
Almost there.
David's knuckles were white.
Hold position. Now!
Zafina commanded. With a final shuddering clank, the dish locked into its final coordinates. A single green light blinked on the main console. Transmitter locked. Carrier signal established. They had done it.
Cammy, transmit the footage.
Zafina ordered. Her voice trembled slightly with exhaustion and relief.
All of it. Raw.
On the main screen, a progress bar appeared. Uploading. Zafina sent her truth. The transmission opened with the raw, warm, chaotic scene of the Stockworth family's dinner, showing Martha Stockworth patiently demonstrating how to use chopsticks and the children bickering good-naturedly. The view cut to the kindergarten, to Miss Flores tying a small child's shoe, her face a picture of gentle concentration. Then the volunteers in the community garden appeared, their hands covered in soil, sharing a laugh under the summer sun. The footage showed David standing atop his bridge at sunrise, the wind whipping at his jacket. The city's quiet protector sleeping below. Last, it showed Detective O'Malley at his cluttered desk, looking at his daughter's photo with an expression of fierce, weary love. This was a collage of small, unquantifiable moments of connection, containing no data on wars or charts on pollution. As the data streamed across the vacuum, Zafina spoke. Her voice was low and steady.
Cam E, open final mission log. Entry. Conclusive.
Her narration, appended to the raw data as a simple text file, was the last thing the High Directorate would receive.
The beings of C-819-3, the humans, are a paradox. My initial analysis focused on their capacity for chaos, and that capacity is indeed immense. They are capable of great destruction, and their own data suggests they are on a path to ruin. But this analysis was incomplete. It overlooked the equal opposing force, the force of construction.
The screen showed David's hands tracing the lines of a blueprint.
They are a species that balances every destructive impulse with a creative one. They build things meant to outlast them for the simple purpose of connecting with one another, of making the world safer for their children, foregoing glory for profit. They live on a planet of constant danger, a world of storms, of predators, of their own making. Yet when encountering a stranger, their first instinct is to invite them into their homes and offer them food.
The footage lingered on the image of Martha smiling as she placed a dumpling on Zafina's plate.
This planet, which the galaxy fears as its deadliest, is paradoxically the most alive. It is a crucible of tension and compromise, and from that stress they forge strength, empathy, and a stubborn, illogical hope. My analysis concludes that our mission should shift. Our focus should shift from quarantining Earth. We should be cherishing it, studying it, learning from it. It is a world some of us might even one day learn to call home.
The progress bar hit 100%. Transmission complete. Silence fell on the control room. The only sound was the generator's hum and the three exhausted saviors' ragged breathing. They stared at the blank screen, waiting. Had it been enough? Had anyone even received it? Minutes stretched on. David putting a comforting hand on Zafina's shoulder. O'Malley leaned against a console, his posture collapsing. The last hour's exhaustion etched onto his face. Then a line of text appeared on the screen in Standard Galactic. The High Directorate's lingua franca itself, not Foran script. The simple encrypted message originated from the Concordance High Directorate leader's personal office. Quarantine rescinded. We have reassigned Prelate Vanox to archival studies of extinct microspore colonies. Ethnographer Thistlein, your findings are profound. Your methodology was unorthodox, but your conclusions are undeniable. We have granted your request for an extended, indefinite stay. Further instructions to follow. End message. A single shared exhalation broke the silence. David pulled Zafina into an awkward one-armed hug. O'Malley just shook his head, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. Extinct microspore colonies, huh? He muttered. That's a hell of a demotion. They had done it, saving the world with a rusty satellite dish, some hot-wired controls, and a plate of dumplings. Months later, the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the Stockworth family's backyard. Grilling meat and laughter filled the backyard. Zafina and Camille were now permanent residents, their motel room a distant memory. Zafina crouched on the patio, using a piece of chalk to draw a complex spiraling pattern on the concrete. She was trying, with some difficulty, to explain the rules of Shimmerfall, a Ferran strategy game, to David and a confused Detective O'Malley, who was off duty and holding a beer.
No, you see, the goal is not to capture the opponent's pieces.
Her voice was earnest.
The goal is to create a pattern of such aesthetic harmony that your opponent concedes out of sheer respect for its beauty.
O'Malley took a long drink from his beer.
So, it's like space chess, but for art critics?
Exactly,
Zafina said, pleased. David groaned, shaking his head.
I'll stick with poker. At least there you're allowed to lie.
He clapped her on the shoulder.
You're getting better at jokes, though. That was almost funny.
Zafina looked at him, then at O'Malley, then at Martha, who was watching them from the kitchen door with a warm smile. And for the first time since she had arrived on this baffling, beautiful planet, soft, rhythmic, melodic tones rose in her voice, layering over one another in a complex chord. Cam E, hovering near the barbecue pit, recorded the event.
Observation,
he stated in his deadpan voice.
Ethnographer's vocal tones are displaying the Ferran pattern for spontaneous amusement. The human equivalent is designated laughter.
Zafina was a participant. Home.